Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to tonight's live stream. Gordon Causey, live and unscripted, with Candy the Wonder Dog, as is almost always the case. Some videos she doesn't show up. Uh, I always start out my videos by giving her a treat. I need the curtain fixed. There we go. So Candy gets her treat. Sit, sit, shake, lay down, speak. All right, and there you go. Candy has the pup. I see Danny's already here. He's written that it's nice that I have a countdown timer to the start time. I think I was a minute or two late getting going tonight. I scheduled this for 10:45, and as I look at the clock right now, it says 10:47, and I'm not even a minute in, so looks like I started at 10:46 or 10:47. Whatever the case, good to be here nonetheless. Today is the 30th of March, Sunday, the 30th of March, 2028, and the aim tonight is to talk about the topic conversation that's dominating kitchen tables all over Canada, probably, and that's our federal election. And I'm going to fixate tonight on the question of whether or not Canadians can have trust in the outcome of the election. Uh, we don't know what it's going to be right now. We don't know what's going to happen on April 28th. The polling numbers right now, the polling numbers that are coming out, are suggesting that the Liberals have pulled ahead of the Conservatives. Maybe I'll share my screen. There's a website called 338.com that provides a snapshot of all the polling going on across Canada. It's a website that's been around for years. I don't know how many elections it's been around. It's named 338.com because there has always been for the last few elections, not always, but for the last few elections, our legislature, the House of Commons, has had 338 seats up for grabs. Now that number has increased. We're now at 343. It'll be interesting to see whether or not 338.com changes the URL, changes their website, makes it 343.com. As Canada's population increases, they add seats to the House of Commons. And thanks, Danny, with respect to me being a minute or two late, is saying, hey, life happens. The joys, I always have to remember, do I have that treat in my pocket? So I'm going to take a look at a snapshot of some of the most recent polling as shared by this site, 338.com. Let's share my screen. And we'll make sure that it is, in fact, sharing. This should come across fairly well because it's, I'm not sharing video, so it is sharing. And what we're seeing that's up is from a couple of days ago, from the 28th, and it's from Nick Nano, thought by many to be a very liberal friendly polling agency. And they have the numbers at 42 for the Liberals, 37 for the Conservatives. Main Street on the same day, they had the Liberals at 42 and the Conservatives at 40. Liaison Strategies, which I'm less familiar with, again on the same date, had it 42-38. 4 points plus or minus is typically what they call the margin of error. So the two most recent polls are within the margin of error, as is the one from Main Street that was conducted on the 27th, 43-40. So they have the Liberals out in front, pretty much within the margin of error. You'll notice each poll is given a rating based on how big the sample size is, the reputation of the polling agency. And so the Nanos poll got an A, the Main Street gets an A minus, Liaison Strategies gets a B. It depends on methodology as well. Some are live phone calls, some are interactive, some are web-based. And so it's based on the methodology, the reputation of the firm, the size, the polling sample, how many people were polled. Some are larger, some are bigger. We got one from Abacus from a few days ago on the 26th, 1,800, and they have it tied 39-39. It's a tight race. And further on this website, they will give, and I wonder if I can find the, what they do is they give seat projections, and they project how many seats each party is expected to win. And so federally, what they are projecting right now is that in the province of Ontario, which is the battleground with 122 seats, 81 plus 39, I was of the impression that Ontario has 122 seats. But they're right now calling for Ontario to elect 81 Liberals, Manitoba to elect 7, Quebec to elect 45, where the Conservatives absolutely romp is in Alberta, 32 of that province's seats, Saskatchewan, 13. Getting my computer starts going too slow. I get frustrated. Sorry about this. It's saying my connection is unstable. This is what happens. Seems to be working better now. I'm going to cut right down to the chase of things. And there are a lot of conservative voices, a lot of people I talk to, a lot of friends, neighbors, colleagues who are of a conservative mindset like me, bias straight up front. I want Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives to win. I want Pierre Poilievre to be our next prime minister. And I'm hearing particularly work. There are a number of conservative minded individuals with whom I work, and they think that the system might be rigged. They don't believe the polls. And in term, those are two separate issues. Can we trust the polling? And for the most part, I do. For the most part, I do. I do think the polling gives a reasonably accurate snapshot of where the election is at this moment in time. But at the same time, the only poll that genuinely matters is the poll that takes place on election day, April 28th. That's the only true poll that matters. No one gets elected. No one gets to win a seat based on polling numbers. You actually have to get the votes. And so what the polls say is irrelevant to the result on April 28th, but the polls can serve as an indication as to what we're gonna see on election night. And I think it is possible that the polling numbers are off, that things may be tighter than is being suggested by the polling, and that maybe the Conservatives are marginally out in front. All of it is neither here nor there. What matters is on April 28th, when they actually start opening the ballot boxes and counting the ballots, who's going to have the most seats in our House of Commons. And I'm here to say, and I've said it before in previous videos, when it comes to our federal elections, the manner in which they're conducted, I have a very high degree of confidence in the results as they are reported. What happens on election night is all the polling stations close, and then the ballot boxes that people have stuffed their ballots into get opened. Those ballots are then counted, tabulated, the results are forwarded on to Elections Canada, and we get the results. And likewise, every candidate running in every riding in Canada, they can appoint individuals as scrutineers, and they can be there observing the vote. They don't take part in the actual counting, but they observe the actual counting to ensure that everything is being done above board. And scrutineers can likewise, if they think a vote is being counted that should not be counted, if they think that the ballot was improperly marked, that it shouldn't be counted, they can file an objection, and that ballot will be set aside. And I mean, at the end of the day, what happens is if there are, say, 100 contested ballots in a riding that a candidate goes on to win by 5,000 votes, well, even if those 150, whatever the number is, if those contested ballots aren't enough to turn the result around, it's kind of a moot point. There's no need for further investigation. If an election is incredibly close, if a candidate wins by 23 votes and there are 100 contested ballots, well, then those contested ballots will be scrutinized very closely to determine to which candidate should those votes go. Uh, Bottom line, what I'm saying is Canadians can trust the results of the election. When that vote happens, the polls will close 8 or 9 p.m., depending on where you are. Doors will be locked. It doesn't take long to count through each ballot box. And then the results get forwarded on to Elections Canada and then CBC, CTV Global, and everyone, even Elections Canada on their website, they start publishing the results. Danny is writing that we Gen Xers, Danny and I are both Gen X, that we must vote Pierre Poilievre into the office of Prime Minister of Canada, or Canada will no longer be recognizable in a large fashion. You know, we look at the way that Canada has been led down the garden path for the past 10 years, with Mark Carney merely acting as an advisor, the top economic advisor to Justin Trudeau. We're living in a country where we no longer recognize, I often say it, the basic fundamental fabric of reality. We don't know the difference between boys and girls, men and women anymore in our nation. And Mark Carney says that Canada needs to be more woke. We have to continue even further down this insane path we have been on. But we're going to have a hard time defeating Mark Carney and the Liberal Party, simply because the media machine, CBC principal among them, is all in on trying to get Mark Carney elected. Right now, there's a temptation to say re-elected, but because he is the sitting prime minister, but he's only sitting prime minister because he was installed. He was put in place by the Liberal Party of Canada itself. And the Liberal Party of Canada, their executive committee, determined who was allowed to run for the leadership. They disqualified candidates. They're disqualifying candidates right now in the local ridings. They're saying this individual, there's a guy in Don Valley, a downtown Toronto riding. I forget the gentleman's name, but he's just been determined to be ineligible to run for the Liberal Party. The individual who had been representing the riding of Nepean for the last, going back to 2015. He's won 3 elections in a row. The Liberal Party, their committee has stepped in and said, you're not allowed to run in your riding anymore. We're going to let Mark Carney represent Nepean instead of you. And it's a very undemocratic process, but it's the process that is in place in our country. And Danny's writing that woke equals asleep. Oh, we are up against, conservative-minded Canadians are up against it hard, because we're David's slinging rocks at Goliath. Goliath is CBC, CTV, and Global News. Millions of Canadians get their marching orders from their nightly newscast, either a local newscast or the national newscast. Danny's puke involuntary protein spill. They allowed 14-year-olds were allowed to, according to the Liberal Party Constitution, to be a card-carrying Liberal Party member, you only have to be 14 years of age, and you don't even have to be a Canadian citizen. And there were in and around 400,000 members of the Liberal Party, and yet only about 151,000 actually cast ballots in the leadership race that vaulted Mark Carney into the Prime Minister's office. How many of those ballots were cast by 14-year-olds? How many were foreign nationals? The Liberal Party, they keep that secret. They don't want Canadians to know how many ballots were cast by children, how many were cast by people who are not even Canadian citizens. And yet that is their process to install a leader. And because the Liberal Party has the most seats in the House of Commons, whoever their leader is, that individual automatically becomes Prime Minister of Canada. And with no mandate from Canadians whatsoever, zero mandate just having been installed as something of a caretaker prime minister. Mark Carney immediately, almost immediately after getting put into the job of prime minister, unelected by Canadians, he immediately, almost immediately, within a day or two, jumped on a plane and he went on a photo op trip to England and to France to meet with Macron and Starmer, and be at the top of the news feed, acting all prime ministerial, accomplishing nothing other than just glad handing, shaking hands. To it's good PR. I'm not going to deny it's good PR. It looks good. Mark Carney, with no mandate at all from the Canadian population, gets to go and act the role of being a legitimately elected Prime Minister of Canada. And the media is not going to hold him to task. And there's a big reason for that. Part of the Conservative Party platform is to defund the CBC, to take away their funding. They get over $1 billion a year from Canadian taxpayers. And that's a big plank in the Conservative Party platform, is to defund the CBC. So if I work for the CBC, if I'm a reporter for the CBC, and my paycheck is dependent upon taxpayer subsidies, I'm working for a crown corporation, I'm working for the government of Canada, I'm basically a civil servant. And I call myself a journalist, but in point of fact, if Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives get in, and CBC loses its government funding, if they sell it off, well, then I'm going to be out of a job. The status quo is what I want, and the status quo is what Mark Carney is protecting in terms of the media in this country. Likewise, if I work for CTV and Global, both of those media outlets are subsidized by taxpayer dollars. The Canadian government under Trudeau, with Mark Carney as his top economic advisor, instituted this program whereby they take about $300 to $400 million each year, is doled out to the CTVs and Globals of the media landscape. Nothing is given to the Western Standard, nothing to Rebel News, nothing to there are a number of alternative media outlets. They get zero. Post millennial, these what I call them media. They are media outlets, but because they're outside of the legacy mainstream, they get butt kissed. They get nothing, no money whatsoever. And the likes of Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau before him, they won't even answer questions from anyone who's outside of the traditional media landscape, the lying propagandistic media that has been programming Canadians for generations, telling us what to think, what to believe, and how to feel about things. And Conservatives, we have got to, those who want to have Pierre Poilievre as the next Prime Minister of Canada, we need to be as loud as we can possibly be. And it's difficult because political conversations are difficult to have. They're contentious. It's, what are the two topics you're supposed to avoid in conversation? Politics and religion. And Canadians are compliant. We're polite. We don't like to stir the pot. And so if you're in a situation in the work lunchroom or, bumping into people, if your political point of views don't line up perfectly 100%, well, you kind of tend to want to leave politics aside. Well, we won't talk about politics. We'll talk about the Maple Leafs. We'll talk about the Blue Jays. We'll talk about TV shows. We'll talk about the movies. We'll talk about things that really have no tangible impact on our lives, just to be polite. And we need to have these conversations. We need to be bold. We need to get out of our Canadian. We have this we are conservative in the sense that we don't like to talk about politics. We like to keep that kind of stuff personal, conservative to ourselves. And we've got to break the mold, conservative-minded Canadians. And in this world of social media, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and countless others, we have even those individuals. If you live out in Alberta, where Alberta is going to elect pretty much a full slate of conservatives. They might elect one or two, maybe one, two, three Liberal NDP. All the other seats are going to go to the Conservative Party of Canada. I mean, I've got the numbers here. Alberta is 37 seats, and all but two or three of them are going to go to the Conservatives. So you may feel like, well, there's not much I can do. But if you're on Facebook and if you're on Instagram and if you're on these social media platforms and you have friends who live in Toronto, you've got a chance to influence them. But if you're posting conservative friendly content, there's a good chance that your content is going to be throttled. So you need to engage as directly as possible with people who live in Battleground Ontario. Battleground Ontario, we have 122 seats. I've got the numbers here. BC has 43, Alberta 37, Saskatchewan 14, Manitoba 14. Ontario has 122. This is where the election is going to be won or lost, is in Ontario and maybe to a degree Quebec. It's a difficult situation we're in. The bottom line is we can trust the results of the election. We can trust that, people, that their vote as they mark it down, that it'll be counted as they marked it in 99.9% of cases. Danny has written down that David had 5 smooth stones because Goliath had 4 brothers. Very good. I do think conservatives, I do think we have a good chance, provided we talk. We've got a debate coming up. Mark Carney is not a good public speaker. He is not quick on his feet. He is prone to erring and awing just as much as Justin Trudeau was, maybe even more. And there is a chance that during those 2 CBC moderated debates, which it's a crappy format, they'll place the leaders far apart from each other. They'll have a moderator very much controlling the exchanges, so you won't get 2 leaders going. You won't see Poilievre and Mark Carney going face to face, toe to toe, back and forth, debating each other. It'll be directed through the moderator. And it's very antiseptic, very boring. But a guy like Mark Carney could still make a big gaffe. I tend to think that Pierre Poilievre is more adept at this type of give and take, parry and thrust than Mark Carney. Mark Carney is used to being the chairman of the board at companies like Brookfield, where what he says is, what he says goes. He's the boss. And we're taking those Canadian jobs and we're moving them down to New York City. And then he signs a letter sent out to all the shareholders, encouraging them to vote the way he wants them to vote, to send those Canadian jobs down to the United States. There are so many talking points that conservatives have to take down Mark Carney. Bring up the fact that he moved high-paying Canadian jobs to New York City. Bring up the fact that he refuses to disclose his financial assets. He wants to keep that hidden from Canadians. Why? Why isn't he being open and transparent and sharing his portfolio so we can see that he's not operating in the best interest of Mark Carney, but instead is operating in the best interest of Canadians? Why is he hiding it? A legitimate question. Why, the fact that he likes to rub shoulders, rub elbows with Ghislaine Maxwell. You can find the pictures all over the internet. Mark Carney tries to explain it away by saying, well, Ghislaine Maxwell is a longtime friend of my wife. Really? There's a nice association. Goodness knows, I had them all written down before. I had a number of these bullet points written down before. There's more than just that. The fact that he has a record of being opposed to pipelines being built to unleash Alberta's enormous resource wealth. He was opposed to the Northern Gateway pipeline, opposed to Energy East, wants Alberta's energy wealth kept in the ground. That's not just an issue for Albertans, it's an issue for Canadians writ large. if we're going to be a wealthy nation, we need to exploit the wealth in every sector of our economy, whether it's in Western Canada, whether it's in Ontario, whether it's down east. How beholden is Mark Carney to the Chinese? A very worthwhile question. Look into the loan secured. I think it's $215 million. A loan taken out. Is Carney beholden to the Chinese? He's written a book in which he espouses Marxist ideology, quoting Karl Marx, the author of the Communist Manifesto, and Lenin, the supreme Bolshevik who led to the who the Bolshevik Revolution that gave us communist Russia, or which later became the Soviet Union. Why do we have a supposed free market economist writing a book quoting the likes of Karl Marx and Vladimir Ilyich Lenin? Blows me away. And so many points out there, again, going to France and Great Britain with no mandate from the people. Anyway, let's just see what's being written. Danny is saying the price of gas will not drop in Quebec. I guess that's because you have your own. I'm expecting that on Monday, not Monday, rather Tuesday, on April 1st, April 1st, 2nd, that people in Ontario, that we're going to see the price of gas. There's about a 17 cent per liter. It's actually a little higher than 17 cents, but about 17 cents per liter carbon tax on gasoline. And now that Mark Carney has unilaterally dropped that down to zero, saying that he is going to replace the carbon tax that consumers pay directly, and he's going to impose carbon taxations on companies themselves. So the oil and gas companies they'll be getting billed directly in carbon taxation, and then they'll simply pass those costs on. They'll pass it on to us consumers, and the price of gas is going to go through the roof again. But we're going to get a 1 month break. 1 month during the election, the price of gas is going to fall. But we're also can expect to see grocery prices going up significantly, and everything else too, with once we get into the reciprocal tariffs that are going back and forth between Canada and the US, and that's slated to start happening April 1, 2, April 1st and 2nd. We're going to start to see tariffs being imposed, and in the days and weeks subsequent to April 1 and 2, prices are going to start to climb as inventories deplete themselves. There will be inventory on hand that was transacted before the tariffs were brought in, but then anything brought into the country after April 1st, 2nd, Ottawa is going to be charging tariffs on it. So an importer bringing in goods from the United States is going to have to start paying to Ottawa millions of dollars, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, who knows. And those costs are going to be passed along to consumers, and the cost of living is going to start going up again. But that's what we've been living for the past 10 plus years with Justin Trudeau, with Mark Carney behind the curtain advising him. Brett's writing, Brett is down in Wyoming. Danny, great thing you're here for him. And not sure what you guys are writing about, but that's Danny saying he rarely misses one of my shows. I got to admit, I'm a little laconic tonight. Sorry, I'm not as animated as I normally am. I'm a little bummed out over the fact that my connection, I seem to be having issues with my internet connection. I've got half a conspiratorial mind that is wondering, am I being throttled? It does occur to me. I don't like to go down that road. I figure, if I'm having technical issues, well, it is what it is. I live in a small rural area, and there are houses going up every single day. There's a large development just west of me, and that's more people. And an internet pipe is only so big, and the more users on the pipe, they chew up internet connections. And so everyone slows down a little bit. It's like congestion on the highway. And what are you going to do? Brett's been busy this afternoon. Cryptomary is here saying happy Sunday. Danny's wondering what Carney's wife is into. Don't think that women are, all these types, all these crimes that we hear about. Remember Paul Bernardo's wife, Carla Homolka, and she was intimately engaged with the horrific crimes of that individual. Tendency to think that only men can be, wicked and evil. And oh no, women can be too. Danny's writing evening to everyone. Brett Skinner is writing that the second is Tariff Day. That's the day when tariffs are slated to come on in the United States. That's when Donald Trump was set to impose them. He said that he wanted to impose them on April 1st, but he decided to avoid the association with April Fool's Day that he would do it April 2nd. Danny's writing at me, off topic, but he's now at season 3 of The Chosen, and it just keeps getting better. We watched season 4, episode 4 tonight, and it's incredible. And it gives so much fodder for conversation. The passages that were covered in the episode that I just watched gave a representation of Jesus's exhortation to, if you're asked to go a mile, go twain, go two. And then likewise, Mary and Martha, when Jesus, they gave a representation of that passage. I believe it's from Luke, where Jesus is giving his teaching, and Martha is listening very attentively while Mary is busying herself with looking after everything and keeping everything clean and putting out the food and doing all the housekeeping. And she's upset at Martha, or rather, I forget which is which. She's upset at Martha for not helping out. And she asked Jesus to rebuke and say, tell her she's got to help me out. And Jesus said, she chose the good portion. She chose to listen to the teaching. All this other stuff is background noise. Let it be. It's such an amazing show, The Chosen. I'm enjoying it more and more with each episode I'm watching. The only thing is, we've only got 4 more. We got 5, 6, 7, 8 of season 4. And when that's done, season 5 isn't available yet online. It's just opened up in the theaters. And I don't think they've done this yet. I don't think any of The Chosen has been available for theatric release, but now for season 5, I believe what they're doing, I know they have season 5. They made it into 3 movies that are going out into theaters, and the Cineplex Odeon in Belleville is showing it. And after we get through the end of season 4, if it's still in the theater, we may just go see it at the theater. I don't know. Haven't decided yet. Brett's writing that house going up every day. I guess you're talking about housing prices, maybe. Cryptomary is writing, I just hope we have enough contracts at work, we can ride them out. The tariffs. I mean, if you have enough inventory in stock that was bought before, if there's a warehouse full with goods from the United States and these were brought into Canada before the tariffs were imposed, then those goods can be sold without, you don't have to worry about tariffs. But once the warehouse empties out and you have to replace it with goods from the United States, then there is a tariff that is going to have to be paid to Ottawa that is going to be passed on to consumers. And I also have to wonder to what degree are suppliers going to just start raising their prices automatically anyway, even though it's old inventory that was brought in before the tariffs were brought into place. Well, let's just pick a day and, raise prices. And what you're going to see at stores have a symbol that they're going to be displaying starting probably next week, the week after, and it'll be a stylized letter T. And they're going to be placing it on price tags when products have a significant jump in price. And the T will be there to explain to you that the reason this product has gone up significantly in price is because Ottawa is imposing tariffs on it. And I think this point needs to be driven home very hard, is that when inflation starts to hit in Canada over the next month, that is not Donald Trump. That is Canada deciding to impose tariffs retaliatory tariffs on the Americans that is driving up the cost for Canadian consumers at a time when we cannot afford it. We did not have to retaliate. We did not have to say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, a tariff for a tariff. We did not have to do that, but we chose to do that. That has been Mark Carney's choice, acting in the role of prime minister. He has decided to do an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and a tariff for a tariff. When the United States imposes tariffs on Canadian goods, that's inflationary for American consumers, not for us. When we retaliate, then that impacts Canadians and makes our lives more expensive. When Trump decided to put 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, it was going to impact those sectors of the economy. Steel and aluminum manufacturers, if they sold lots of their product into the United States, it was poised to impact them significantly. And then at that point, Ottawa could come in and subsidize those industries, provide them with assistance. They could also try and establish new markets in other countries, look to Europe, look to the Far East, look to South America, try and find alternative markets for those products. But I'm here to say that Canada, guys like Mark Carney are already acting like we're the 51st state, like we have some inherent right to sell our aluminum and steel into the United States as if we are the 51st state. Anyway, just going to go read up on. And Danny is saying that the stream so far is good. I'm not lagging or buffering. That's good. It's been annoying the degree to which my stream, I go back and watch and I see the lagging, the buffering, the skipping, and it makes it unwatchable a lot of the times. Brett Skinner is writing that that's the truth. Must be nice to have money to build and buy land. Ever since the COVID era, we've seen the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. And sadly, what we've also been watching is what used to be, the liberal side. The liberal side used to be anti corporate, anti big business. They were pro the little guy, and now liberals are all about punishing the little guy. Liberals are all about quelching free speech. And it's like it makes my head hurt. How is it that liberals want to see the corporate sector get wealthier at the expense of the working class? And how is it that they want to see freedom of speech clamped down on? Have liberals become conservatives and conservatives have become liberals? I call myself a classic liberal. A classic liberal. A classic liberal, cherishes free speech, especially when I disagree with what someone is saying. If I disagree with someone, that's the most important time that I have to stand in support of their freedom to express their ideas, even though I disagree with them. Anyway, Danny's writing, too bad they removed Nicodemus due to monetary constraints. I really like that character, but I find Matthew kind of strange. I didn't know that they removed the actor. Nicodemus. I noticed in season 4 they're referencing him. We have to remember it's early in John's gospel when Jesus sits down with Nicodemus and has that meeting with him. And they could bring him back for later episodes. This is what The Chosen does, is they kind of, try and flesh out the backstory and give context and give the viewer an understanding of what it might have been like to be living in first century Judea under Roman occupation. It wouldn't surprise me to see Nicodemus come back, though. The one thing is the Chosen has been an enormous financial success. It's probably the most watched ever biblical-based streaming show in history. So we'll see. Danny's saying, got to see it in the theater. Yeah, season 5. I think the first episode is labeled The Last Supper, the first movie. It's almost like Lord of the Rings Lord of the Rings was written as one book. And then it was Tolkien's publisher who said, man, this thing is massive. We can't release this as one book. we need to break it into three. And so Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King. And it was broken into three, but originally J.R. Tolkien wrote it as just one. And so what they've done is for season 5 is I believe they've broken it into three separate movies. And the first one, I believe, is called The Last Supper. And I don't know what the subsequent two are called, but you can look it up. You can go to thechosen.com or their app that they have, and they, they're more up to date than I am, obviously. Danny's writing the mental gymnastics needed to understand liberals. It's difficult, although conservatives likewise have kind of flipped around too. Back in 1987, 88, when Canada was negotiating the first free trade agreement with just the United States, the precursor to the North American Free Trade Agreement. There was the US-Canada Free Trade Agreement. And back then, it was the liberals who were opposing free trade, and it was the conservatives who were promoting it. And that, to a degree, made sense. Conservatives were always thought to be about big business, and free trade is great for the corporate sector, horrible for the little guy. All the good-paying blue-collar union jobs went down to states with no minimum wage, and then later shipped down to Mexico. And so that was, but for the corporate sector, it was good because they could, go to lowest common denominator, a race to the bottom in terms of wages and benefits and working conditions. That's big business loves that. And so it made sense back then. But now it's the liberal side of the equation that is promoting more and more free trade and shipping high-paying Canadian jobs or American jobs to jurisdictions with no minimum wage laws, minimal to non-existent labor standards, no benefits. Send the jobs there. Send them to Bangladesh. Send them to Thailand. Send them to China. And it's just so conservatives have flipped around now, and now it's conservatives who are the party of the working class. The blue collar, the factory floor, the hourly wage earner, the union member are more prone to be voting for the conservatives now. Everything's flipped upside down. We're living in the upside down. And I don't, I don't feel like my worldview has changed that much. I was opposed to free trade all the way back when, 87, 88. I was opposed to it then, and I'm still opposed to it. I think that countries should be allowed to impose tariffs to promote and protect vital industry groups like steel and aluminum, like softwood lumber, like any number of industries. If you want to promote your industries, tariffs provide a fashion to do that. If you're a globalist, if you want the world to be borderless, if you want to live in this Mark Carney, Justin Trudeau post-nationalistic world where there is no Canadian identity, this is what's so funny about this election is Carney and Trudeau. Mark Carney's on the board of directors at the World Economic Forum, which is promoting this idea of a borderless world and no Canadian identity. Now he's running an election where he's pretending to be the big defender of the Canadian identity. And I guess I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to keep this one under an hour. I haven't done a video for 2-3 nights just because I haven't really felt up to it. My back has been bugging me a bit. The head cold is over for the most part, but it's just we need to be loud. We need to be bold. You need to talk to everyone. You got to bring up the talking points. I'll enumerate them again. Bring up the fact that Mark Carney likes chumming around with his wife's good friend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who's now in jail for her crimes that she committed with her partner, Jeffrey Epstein. Is that a good look? The fact that he moved high-paying Canadian jobs from Toronto to New York City. And find that letter. It's available all over the place. The letter that he wrote to Brookfield shareholders, encouraging them, telling them they needed to vote in favor of this decision that was made with him leading the charge as the chair of the board of directors. And the fact that he lied about it afterwards and said, "Oh, that decision wasn't made until I left." No, the decision to leave was made while you were chairman, but